If you're a college wrestling fan who supports a specific college, then you love to yell at other colleges that your school is the best. But I'm here to tell you which school is statistically the best and which has been the best over the last 20 years at producing national champions. If you want to know who it is, let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's up, my name's Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling, where I talk about wrestling news, tips, and lifestyle. And in this video, we're going to be diving into so many awesome stats over the last 20 years as to which college has produced the most national champions, the most team titles, and which wrestling conference has produced the most national titles. First of all, let's talk about the conference. Which conference has produced the most national champions? Out of the conferences, there's Big 10, Big 12, EIWA, Pac-12, SoCon, ACC, MAC, EWL. Now, over the last 20 years, there have been many changes, many shifts in the college wrestling paradigm as far as conferences are concerned. So I'm kind of going with what the conferences are right now. You know, Pac-12 went from Pac-10 to Pac-12, MAC and EWL shifted together. There have just been so many changes. Top three, listen, you have EIWA, who's had 25 champions, total national titles, and 18 individual champions. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy that I'll go into in the future as well as far as total number of titles. So this includes multiple titles for one individual, and then they're just the individuals. So there are 18 total individuals who've won national titles. Of course, they've won multiple. Then the Big 12 is second, 53 total titles, so doubling the EIWA and 33 individual champs. And then doubling them is the Big 10. Big 10 has had 102 titles and 67 champs since 1999. So pretty darn impressive. And then, of course, here you have the rest of the conferences. There's MAC, Pac-12, and ACC, followed by the SoCon. And what's interesting in this graph is that Big 10 seems to make up almost half of the national champions over the last 20 years. And now I'm going to count down the top 10 colleges that have won national titles at producing national titles. I think it's interesting to dive into a couple programs that have been dropped since 1999 because a lot of programs have been added, a lot have been dropped. But that have been dropped that have actually produced national champions. These schools, Boise State, Oregon, and UC Davis. Boise State has actually had two. They've had Kirk White and Ben Charrington. Oregon had Shane Webster, and UC Davis had Derek Moore. So these are all schools that have produced national champions but are no longer with us as in college wrestling. Now, let's talk about the top 10 wrestling colleges producing national champs. Honorable mentions. Arizona State has produced 5. Michigan and Nebraska also have produced 5 national champions over the last 20 years. So pretty impressive. Now, those schools are really, on the rise, and they're always in the hunt. And that's the great thing about these is that they can change at any time with more national champions. But this is as it stands right now in 2019. So let's get into these top 10 schools, okay? So top 10, we have Oklahoma. Oklahoma comes in at number 10. They've had 7 champions, total, or 7 titles with 6 individual champions. Tan Ware, 2-timer. Last champion was Cody Brewer in 2015. At number 9, Illinois, Big 10 school. A lot of these are Big 10 schools, Big 10, Big 12. But we have a couple other schools that kind of pop into their MAC, EWL. So Illinois, Jesse Delgado, Carl Perry, Imar, all national champions. They've had 8 total titles and 6 individual champions. Similarly, Missouri had 8. They've had 8 national champions with Ben Askren, Max Askren, Mark Ellis, all national title winners during that time. Kind of making a jump here. So we go from 8 total titles up to 12. And who is that? What school is that? Minnesota. Minnesota has had 12 titles during that time. They're actually tied for 5th overall in individuals who have won titles. And that is, you got Brock Lesnar during that time, Damian Hahn, Cole Conrad, and Tony Nelson. And the number 6 school, Ohio State. Ohio State has had 14 champions, 7 individual champions. So Logan Sieber obviously helping them out a bunch with 4 titles. Jeff Jaggers, Tony Rowland, Kyle Snyder also helping out a bunch, a 3-timer, most recent national champion from Ohio State. Now, going to the top 5, and I will go into which schools have had the most team titles during that time as well, during 1999 to 2019. Now, top 5. Number 5 is a school from Iowa. It's not Iowa, it's Iowa State. Iowa State has had 14 total titles, 10 individual champions during that time, including Kel Sanderson, Jake Varner, Aaron Holker, Kyvan Gadsden, all national title winners. Now, going to the top 5, and I will go into which schools have had the most team titles during that time as well, during 1999 to 2019. Now, coming in at number 4, a school that kind of surprised me with making this top 5, not that I didn't think that they had the capability, but it just surprised me that they were so high. And that's Cornell, okay? Cornell has had 15 total titles during this time. They've had 9 individual champions. Of course, you have Kyle Dake, who's a 4-timer, which really helps their title count. Gabe Dean, a 2-timer. Travis Lee, Brent Metcalf. It is not from Cornell. I don't know why I have him on the list. Last champ is Yanni D, a 2-timer. A 2-timer is Yanni D. And looking to earn more, having Cornell possibly make that jump up a little bit more. Now, somebody where Brent Metcalf did go is Iowa, okay? So Iowa is the number 3 school on this list. Now, these top 3 schools, you can probably guess who they are, but it's just where do they fall on this list as far as the last 20 years. Now, Iowa has had 19 total champs during this time over 20 years. 19 champs over 20 years. Averaging about 1 a year. 13 individuals. You got Matt McDonough, Brent Metcalf, TJ Williams, Mark Perry, Corey Clark, Tony Ramos, and Spencer Lee, the most recent national champion out of Iowa. Now, number 2 and number 1. Do you know who they are? Well, I'll tell you number 2 is. Number 2 is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State wrestled in the Big 12. They have had 23 national titles over the last 20 years. You got Alex Dieringer, Chris Perry, Jordan Oliver, Coleman Scott, Olympian. A lot of these guys won multiple national titles. Now, early on, you also had Johnny Thompson and Chris Pendleton. The last champion was Dean Heil from Oklahoma State, wrestled and won a national title in 2017. Now, the number one school, which they're not number 1 over the entire span of wrestling, but as far as the last 20 years, it's kind of not really a surprise, but it's Penn State. Penn State wrestles, of course, in the Big Ten. They've had 26 national titles since 1999. Now, a lot of these titles actually came in the last 10 to 12 years, and that's kind of kicked off with Phil Davis winning a national title in 2008. Because before that, they didn't have a champ since 2000 with Jeremy Hunter. Now, of course, during that time, you had 15 individuals. Jason Nolf, Vincenzo Joseph, Zane Rutherford, Bo Nickel, Mark Hall, Quentin Wright, Ed Ruth. These guys are just all national title winners and really helped push Penn State up the boundaries. Now, which teams have won the most national titles since that time? I think that's also interesting to look at. Not just individual titles, but team titles. Number 5, Ohio State. Ohio State is number 5. They have had 1 championship. And actually, there have only been 5 schools to win national championships since 1999. And they're all on this list, of course. Ohio State, the only team to knock out Penn State during their reign over the last few years. Ohio State won that title in 2015. Number 4 is Minnesota. Now, Minnesota also kind of knocked out another team who was on a long reign in Oklahoma State. They have wins that are kind of sandwiched on the edges of Oklahoma State, who, yes, they are next on this list. Minnesota won in 2001 to 2002, and then 2007. They have 3 titles during that time, And then comes Oklahoma State. So they have had 4 titles during this time, winning, like I said, in between Minnesota during those years. And they won actually in Oklahoma, in their hometown, in 2006. Now, the number 2 and number 1 teams, like I said, you can probably guess who they are. Just who's number 1, okay? Number 2 is Iowa. Iowa has had 5 national titles from 99 to 2019. Their last title came in 2010. Now, so it's been a little time, but they've had kind of their years where they've had a little run. 2008, 2010 was probably their biggest run. And then in 2001, they actually won in Iowa. They also won at Penn State back in the day as well. And the number 1 school is Penn State. Penn State has had 8 national team titles, actually 8 over the last 9 years. So they are a more recent run from 2011, 2014, and 2015 and 2019. They picked up team wins in Oklahoma and Iowa, but still they have not picked up a team win in the Bryce Jordan Center, of course, because the national tournament's not there. They did pick up a win, however, in Pittsburgh. And if you enjoyed this stats video about which colleges have had the most success over the last 20 years, you're also going to like these other videos in this series about which high schools and which hometowns have had the most success since 1999. Make sure you check that video out here.